Alright guys, welcome back to another video in the series. We're going to be talking about, is solar worth it in 2025? What we've covered so far is the buyback rate. We've covered consumption versus production and how much energy we're actually using. We've covered how much we're actually making on the money that we sell back to the utility company and how that's screwing us today. And now we want to talk about what's the solution, right? Because so far, all the videos that I have made educational videos on are basically how the utility operates, how the utility is screwing us, and really haven't talked about anything that we can do as far as a solution. So what I want to do with this video is provide a solution for those that are looking to save money on the utility company, utility bill, but not only just for right now, but also for the long term. And so I'm going to talk about a couple different options, but really it's just meant to be educational. And so hopefully if you guys are following along, you've already watched the last few videos. That will give you a much more in-depth knowledge and understanding of why the battery that we're going to talk about now becomes so important. So the last video we talked about what happens if I have a system that is 10,000 kilowatt hours producing and I'm consuming 10,000 kilowatt hours, right? And understanding that I'm going to sell back 7,000 kilowatt hours back to the utility company because I'm only going to use 3,000 kilowatt hours of what I'm actually producing because I don't use every kilowatt hour of every single day that my system's producing. And we talked about how that's not favorable for us. And so what we're going to talk about in this video is how instead of selling power back to the utility company, how we can store that energy and actually utilize a rate plan the utility company has that really actually flips the switch, flips the script, sorry, on the whole utility giving us less value than what it's worth and all that. And so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into the two different rate plans so you can see, right? So typically the rate plan most homeowners are on post-solar is this one. It's called the time of use 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. weekdays. You have an off-peak and an on-peak. You're 12.3 cents during off-peak, 34 cents during on-peak. And the issue with this rate plan a lot of times is that even when you have solar, it still doesn't completely eliminate your on-peak usage, but your off-peak is 12.3 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you guys remember, our buyback rate is only 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So every kilowatt hour we feed back to the grid, we're getting half the value of what I need just for off-peak energy with the utility company. That rate plan, it used to be decent back in the day. You know, I'm talking 7-8 years ago when our buyback rates were higher, right? When buyback rates were 11 cents, 12 cents, like that rate plan would have been fine. But now that the buyback rate's so low, that rate plan's no longer good if you have solar. You lose a lot of money on that plan. So what's the alternative option? Well, there's this plan called the time of use 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. weekdays with demand charge. And there's a big difference with this plan. The main thing is your off-peak is 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour, right? So imagine this. Imagine I use 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. I get a system that produces 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. We've already established that 70% of that's going to go back to the grid. So 7,000 kilowatt hours are going to go back to the grid. I'm going to get a credit for 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour. And now, instead of me buying that energy back from the utility company at 12.9 cents per kilowatt hour, I'm buying it back at 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour. Huge difference because now I'm actually getting more, right? More than the value that it cost me that I'm selling it back to the utility company for, right? Completely flipping the script. Now, this plan is unique because it implements a couple different things. One, your off-peak and on-peak are super cheap, which is great. If you have solar, that's exactly what you're wanting because that buyback rate isn't going to actually kill you as much. But this plan has something called a demand charge. And this demand charge is what a lot of people don't understand. So let's say you have solar and you have that same setup, right? It's 100% offset, 10,000 kilowatt hours being produced because you currently consume 10,000 kilowatt hours, but you don't have a battery. What will happen is on this plan, you get charged a demand charge, which, let me see right here. It says they take your highest hour of usage during on-peak hours from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., meaning that you could have one bad hour from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. throughout the entire month. And I'm talking the whole 30, 31 days. And if you had one bad hour during that 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. time frame, you will get charged a demand charge multiplier on that. You'll get charged a demand multiplier no matter what. But it only takes one bad hour to get screwed, right? And what that means is that if I use appliances, if I stagger appliance use like this, you can see my demand stays lower, right? Because I'm not using them at the exact same time. If I stack my appliance use and use it in 1 hour, right, you can see how my demand is going up. And what that does is they're going to take whatever that demand is and multiply it by $19.58. The issue with that is that if I have one bad hour and I accumulate 10 kilowatts of demand, well, guess what? I'm getting charged an extra $200 that month just for demand charge. So while I might believe that, oh, cool, I'm paying way less for off-peak, right? I've got basically a kilowatt hour for kilowatt hour credit now, right? I should be good. I should be saving money now with solar. This is great. Well, not actually, because that demand charge is going to wipe out all those savings and sometimes even more. And I'll end up being negative once again, right? So what do we have to do, right? Well, last year, Tesla came out with a battery. It's called a Powerwall 3. The whole purpose of this battery was to help customers in two different scenarios. Either one, help them where they have frequent power outages so that they have power, they can power their home during outages for an extended amount of time. And two, to help consumers that are in time of use locations where buyback rates are really bad, like in California, for example, and now Arizona. And so what that Powerwall 3 does is you program it to store energy from your solar system or during off-peak from the grid. And then during on-peak, so from 4 to 7 p.m., that battery is programmed to offload energy. So now instead of getting your energy from the utility company from 4 to 7 and potentially risking getting a big demand charge at the end of the month, you're going to eliminate your demand charge or at least bring it down to where it's next to nothing. Now we can take full advantage of the off-peak being 5.9 cents, having that rate be actually cheaper than what our rate rider is, and our on-peak is super cheap because we're honestly not going to pull much power during on-peak because my solar battery is actually going to be powering my home during that time, and I don't have to worry so much about the demand charge, right? Now, there is a downside to this, and it's one is that if I'm showing you 100% offset, if I'm saying, hey, if you have 10,000 kilowatt hours that you're consuming and we need to produce 10,000 kilowatt hours, that's going to look a lot cheaper than if I said we have to produce 10,000 kilowatt hours and we need to give you a battery, because a battery is going to cost you an extra $70 a month, right? Or if you're going to pay cash for it, it's going to cost you an extra 12, 13 grand. And so maybe a little bit less, right, depending on the company you go with, depending on the install price. But you also will get tax incentives and things like that. But anyways, doesn't really matter. The thing is, a lot of solar companies, a lot of salespeople, they don't want to tell you about the battery because it doesn't look as good when they show you your fake savings. You know what I mean? If I say, hey, the lease for 10,000 kilowatt hours is this much money, right? And I compare that to what you're paying APS, which is way up here. You're going, oh man, that's an amazing deal. I'm saving a ton of money. Why would not everybody do this? And the reason why is because you're upside down on that gap there. It doesn't actually work that way. But if I add a battery, that cost per month is going to come up a lot closer to what you're currently paying the utility company, which is where people start to think, oh, maybe it's not worth it, right? Which, totally wrong. I mean, you can make that assessment for yourself, whether you think it's worth it for you or not. But the goal of solar is not always to save $1,000 a month. The goal is actually to get yourself into a fixed rate that's not going to go up over the course of the next 10, 20, 25 years. And so by utilizing a battery and utilizing what we call energy arbitrage, you're going to get the ability to get the lowest possible rate with APS. You're going to get the ability to actually have solar on a setup that's actually going to save you money. You're also going to have a backup system, so in case that there's ever a power outage, anything like that, you're going to be completely covered, at least for a few hours. And beyond that, you're going to protect yourself from the future. As APS increases these rates, you know exactly what you're going to be paying, and you're going to have a rate that is the same every single month all throughout the year for a very, very long time. And so this is the true value of solar. And to be completely honest with you, this is the only way you can go solar in Arizona anymore. If you don't do it with a battery, if you're not storing energy and getting on this other rate plan with demand charges, you will be screwed by the utility company. You will not save money and you will not be happy. This is not to say that, you might not be happy with the service of the installer, the communication of the installer, your sales rep. You might have a great experience with all of them. But when push comes to shove, a year from now when you're looking at your utility bill, if you're not on this rate plan and you don't have a battery, you're going to realize you're not saving money, right? And it does not stop, because every single year APS is going to increase rates. By you having solar, it doesn't protect you from APS increasing their rates, so that gap difference between what they're giving you for kilowatt hour and what you're paying them gets bigger and bigger and bigger, making it harder and harder to make sense of it. Having a battery allows us to rely on mainly just your solar, right? And in fact, I actually pulled this up on ChatGPT, but assuming you have one Powerwall 3, not two, your battery will increase your usable solar up to 70 to 80%, meaning you're using 30%, you're storing 40 to 50%, and then the other 20% is what you're selling back to the utility company, right? And so that 20% is the only part that you have to worry about getting that 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour, but it doesn't matter because you're only paying 5.9 cents, right? So this is why it's such an important thing to have that battery there. And if that's confusing to you, I totally get it. I'm not saying it's not confusing. I'm not saying it's not complicated, but this is what you have to understand for you to understand how solar makes sense in 2025, right? Because the question I've been trying to answer for people is, does solar make sense in 2025? And the answer isn't straightforward, right? Solar alone in 2025 does not make sense financially, right? Solar alone in 2025 will more than likely turn you upside down. Now, if you can afford to pay cash and you're willing to buy twice as many panels as what you need, yes, you can still save money and see a return on your investment. But if you're not paying cash and you're not willing to do a 200% offset, solar is not going to work the way you want it to work. The only way it's going to work is by combining a battery with the solar, having a true 100% offset, probably closer to 120, 125 if you really, really want to make sure you're not paying the utility company. Because keep in mind, even with this rate plan, you still have taxes, fees, basic service charges, right? The basic service charge, $15 a month alone. So you might want to still go a little bit bigger, right? And it is going to be a little bit closer to a break even. I'm not saying it's going to be exactly break even where you're not saving money. You might save 10, 20% year one. But this will allow you to actually know what you're going to pay. And mathematically, it makes sense, right? And I can actually make sense of what I'm doing, the decision I'm making, right? Whereas with solar only, it's pretty hard mathematically for that to make sense. So hopefully this helps answer your guys' question about if APS makes sense, or if solar makes sense in 2025 with APS. All of this stuff that I just went over, it's very, very similar in other utility companies in Arizona and other utility companies nationwide that have time of use plans, specifically utilities that allow you to have a time of use with demand where you can really, really get a cheap rate for power during that off-peak energy time. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section. If you enjoyed, please follow, like, share this with people that you know that are looking to get solar, who already have solar. If you already have solar, you can still get a battery. It's not too late. Batteries can be retrofitted to your system. It's not going to be as cost effective as if you got your battery when you first did your solar, but it's still available, right? And I'm going to recommend doing it because otherwise you're just not going to enjoy having solar. And the likelihood is that you have some 25-year agreement with your solar company, so you may as well get something that's going to allow you to actually enjoy having those solar panels on your roof, even if it means you're paying a little bit more every single month compared to what you expected to pay when you first went solar. But you still can truly eliminate a lot of that cost that you're still paying the utility company, and probably eliminate it altogether if you do it the right way. And so that's all for now. Once again, my name is Michael. I'm with Apex Solar. If you guys have any questions or you want to learn more about solar, feel free to reach out to me. I'm not making these videos to get leads or be able to make more sales, but I really just want to educate the West Valley. I've been in the industry for 8 years now, and I've just seen so many people confused by how solar works, and there's no rhythm or rhyme to whether or not people are going to save money. They have no idea. And so hopefully this brings a little bit of clarity as to why that's the case and why that's been happening to people. But that's all for now. I'm signing off. We'll see you guys later.